The ability to speak does not make you intelligent.
Welcome, Gothamites, to another episode of the Arkham Sessions. My name is Brian Ward. With me, as always, the psychologist to the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City, the MCU, and now a galaxy far, far away. It's Dr. Drea Letamendi. Hello, Drea.
Hi, Brian. How are you?
Excited. I'm excited because we've got all kinds of things happening. By the way, we are in the most relaxed, chill sort of setup that we've ever had on this show.
Speak for yourself.
We're sitting on a couch. We don't normally sit on our couch, but we might even be eating. The reason is our anniversary is tomorrow. It also is the day that we are getting into a car and driving down to Anaheim in order to go to Star Wars Celebration for the weekend. And we still have to record an episode. So we
definitely wanted to get this one in before Celebration.
Yeah.
This is not the ideal recording environment for me. There's a lot of distractions. There's beverages. There's laptops.
There's food.
All these things.
You might hear us
There's
eating.
Cats jumping on me, but
Cats.
I will do my best to stay on task. And what a task we have, because we are talking about the Phantom Menace today.
This isn't my fault. This is you made the decision. Although we should explain why. If you remember way back in the day when we first started this podcast, we made the announcement that the reason we were doing Batman the Animated Series specifically is because it had a writer's Bible. And we were going to be going from episode 1 all the way through in order. So we weren't like skipping the bad episodes. We weren't doing our favorite episodes first. We weren't starting with Mask of the Phantasm. We were going in order because you believe as a psychologist that you need to have the backstory, you need to have the history, you need to be able to see it all happen as it happens. And with Batman the Animated Series, that worked out in our favor because we actually saw some arcs.
We did, and I'm thinking about a book I'm reading right now called No Bad Parts, and it's actually a psychology book about welcoming all the different parts and features of ourselves and the different beings and sides of us, even the ones that like are not the greatest, are not the strongest, maybe are ones that we would say we don't even like. That pertains to the thoroughness, I think, of this coverage of these series, the shows we watch, the universes that we analyze, to just be, I'd say that I'm a completionist and I want to include all aspects of it. But I think the healthy part of this too is I guess, staying true to that concept of no bad parts. Is there anything? We're starting with the Phantom Menace. What about the Phantom Menace in this big universe, in this big story, in this narrative? What can we pull from the Phantom Menace that is meaningful, that is powerful, that's relatable, that helps us understand ourselves? And I bet we can do that. That is our mission today.
This isn't even the part that I dislike the most, if that's what we're talking about. But before we get into the bad or not bad parts of Star Wars and the menace that is phantomed and all that stuff, we have to talk about, we got a comment from our most recent episode, which was on Avengers Endgame. I had complained about the inconsistency of the Power Stones, the Infinity Stones, and how they were being used by different entities, and how there were different sort of repercussions for having used those Infinity Stones by different people. With Thanos, there was really no issue. He could use them fine, except when he tried to destroy the Infinity Stones, and then he was basically one half of himself was like a crispy critter. But Hulk did it instantly. One half of himself was burned up, and then Tony did it, and it killed him. So
yikes, you did it again. You just spoiled Endgame.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Everybody.
All right. So Luke over on Twitter says, hey, listening to the Endgame review, talking about the toll of using the stones. Remember Game of Thrones. It's not Game of Thrones, but he's using the abbreviation. So I instantly go to Game of Thrones. Remember Guardians of the Galaxy. Using the stone would kill a normal mortal, but Peter has celestial heritage. Thanos does as well. So he is suggesting that maybe all along, instead of Tony, Quill should have been the one to use the Infinity Stones, except that he gave up his celestial heritage basically by destroying Ego, so maybe it wouldn't work. Thanos, while it isn't necessarily explained in the context of the movies, does come from Titan, and his beings are sort of godlike. But I will give him that, except there's this little tidbit, right? That only applies if you're trying to wield the stones directly, so in your own hand. The whole point of the gauntlet is to act as a container, basically a cosmic Tupperware for the Infinity Stones. It's not simply to have a cool looking gem-filled glove. It's literally so that you can harness the power of the stones without needing to be a celestial being. And no one can really harness all of them, but the gauntlet helps. We see this with like Loki's scepter, for example. It's got the Mind Stone. He's not using it directly, but he's able to wield the scepter.
Yeah.
And so are other people who are just mere mortals. The Tesseract, when it's not active, can be held. We've seen other people hold a Tesseract, and that's not an issue. So if there are containers, then the stones can be held by mere mortals and can be used by those mortals. I would call the Infinity Gauntlet a container, including the one that Tony makes out of his own, parts, his various Iron Man parts. So maybe because of the fact that the gauntlet was created by over at the Cosmic Forge, perhaps that is giving it power that other people can't. Tony Stark can't just create that out of his own Iron Man pieces, but yeah, the whole point really of the gauntlet was to be a container so that whoever wore it could wield the power of the stones. But I appreciate that. Because Luke, you're on to something, and that very well may be the answer.
I think that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, that we're all looking for.
Brian, you know what else makes sense?
What makes sense?
You know those days when your coffee shop is out of cold brew and your air conditioner breaks, and you try to go to the beach, but there's 0 parking spots. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
or maybe your internet goes down when you're about to stream a show.
We have had that problem. Life can be hard.
It can be hard. Good thing MeUndies is here to help you take a break from the hardships of the world and give yourself a soft summer. When you're cocooned in the softest and most breathable undies, loungewear, and swimwear known to humanity, all your other problems will simply melt away.
Here's the thing. As I said, we are going to Anaheim for Star Wars Celebration this week, and I am already packed. I bet you didn't know this. I'm already packed. My suitcase has everything in it I'm going to take with me, with very few exceptions. I have packed all my underwear. There isn't a single pair of underwear in that suitcase that is not MeUndies. That is, honest to God, that's the truth. I'll tell you why. Because what I've learned from this underwear it is so comfortable, but more importantly, it is so cool, and I mean to the touch. So it breathes easily. It is very cool to wear. You and I are going to be walking around a convention center for the rest of the week. We are going to be walking around Disneyland and California Adventure for the rest of the week. The last thing I want is to be wearing uncomfortable, hot, unbreathing underwear. I don't want to be sweating in places that you don't want to be sweating. And my experience is that these undies will prevent all of that discomfort.
Star Wars Celebration is a wonderful convention. It's a wonderful event. The Avengers compound is an amazing place, but these locations are going to be sweaty. Your butt doesn't have to be, Brian. With MeUndies and its light and breathable micromodal fabric, you can stay comfy and cool all summer long.
That's what it is. It's the micromodal fabric.
Yeah,
All
they
right.
have super fun seasonal prints and tons of styles to choose from in sizes extra small to 4XL. So you can bring the beach to your butt without ever leaving your living room. If you do dare to brave the heat and venture to the pool or beach, check out their new and improved swimwear styles. Again, they're soft, stretchy, and sustainably made. Make it a soft summer with MeUndies.
MeUndies has a great offer for our listeners. For any first-time purchasers, you get 15% off. If you sign up for their free-to-join membership, you can apply that 15% off to their already discounted membership prices.
To get 15% off of your first order and a 100% satisfaction guarantee, go to MeUndies.com/Arkham. That's MeUndies.com/ARKHAM.
Awesome. Can't wait to start talking about Star Wars. Andrea, for starters, I want you to tell me.
Where are we going to start with this?
Here's where we're going to start with it. We're going to start with why this is your favorite of the 9 movies. We're going to start. Oh, wait.
What in the heck? No.
Okay, here's what we're going to start with. I want to know, because some of our listeners may not realize that you actually had an entire podcast dedicated just to your love of Star Wars.
Yes.
If it's not Batman, it's Star Wars. Those are your two fandoms. What is it about Star Wars that you love so much, and how did you get into this fandom to begin with?
I have been a fan of Star Wars since very little. So as a kid, we did have the action figures. My sister and I grew up playing with actually a lot of, I'm going to use some gendered terms here. We had kind of a neighborhood home that a lot of us kids went to for like after school, just to get like watched over.
Like a neighbor that...
Yeah, I mean, it's not a babysitter. It's more of like a community childcare, but it wasn't childcare. I think for folks who grew up in the 80s knows what I mean.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you went over to basically one house where they weren't getting paid, but frankly, they were taking care of you after school.
Yeah. It was loosely supervised, and they had sons, and so there were tons of toys that I think were marketed to boys in the 80s. Star Wars toys, Voltron, He-Man. I loved these toys.
What kind of house was that? Where did you live? You had one house that had all this stuff.
And they had that Castle Grayskull. I'm not going to really even go into this.
Did they have the USS Flag? The big, like, 5-foot aircraft carrier for G.I. Joe?
They did not have that. They didn't have a ton of G.I. Joe, but they did have Star Wars action figures, and I started to play with them, not really knowing what it was. And then over the course of my adolescence, started to discover the movies because they would play on TV, and my father and I would watch them. And this is where my sister and I kind of diverged, where I really got into the Star Wars like story, and she's a little bit older. She found other things to be interested in. And in the 90s, during that release of the original trilogy, I believe it was like 95 or 96.
These were the special editions.
Yeah, they put them out in the theaters, and my love of Star Wars just absolutely peaked and blossomed. And I would dress up as a Jedi slash, I had like my own character, a Jedi slash bad Jedi. So this is like kind of...
so like a Sith.
It's not really a Sith, sort of like a wayward Jedi.
Okay.
And then...
So you dress up as Anakin.
Kind of. This was before I really knew Anakin, as we know Anakin. And that led into a teenagehood and early 20s of obsessing over Star Wars, collecting a lot of Star Wars toys and figurines, art.
You'd go full-blown cosplay?
Yeah. No,
You'd do like a Lady Vader?
I cosplayed as a Lady Darth Vader, and Granty Mahara, who unfortunately has passed away, was the engineer who helped create a part of my costume that lit up and was functioning.
The whole belt and the little center chest piece
that's right,
that Vader wears, yeah.
So I'd say, I mean, going back to some of my formative years, let's kind of center on the Phantom Menace for a moment. When the Phantom Menace came out, as you can imagine, just like so many other fans of Star Wars, I was anticipating this movie. I centered my life around this to the degree that we, as many others, have stories about waiting in line overnight to see this film and making friends with people in the line, seeing each other in costumes. And I have to say that it was more of a cultural belongingness, more of an experience. Not so much what is happening in the story. We knew this was the origin of Anakin Skywalker. We knew we were going to see Obi-Wan. We knew we were going to see Yoda. Like we kind of knew that these were the characters that we'd encounter, and we'd get some origin. We'd fill in the gaps of some of the origins. But I have to say that my expectations around the story itself, they weren't as big as my expectations around feeling that sense of togetherness again, that sense of connection to something that that my group of friends loved so much. And that's way more meaningful than actually picking through what occurs, scene by scene in this film.
So I'm glad that we started with this. I'm glad that we started getting your sort of insight as to like when you got started and what actually ignited your fandom and how that fandom grew over the years. I was born in 1977 in the summer. I do not remember the release of Star Wars. However, my father used to take me to the movie theater a lot to see Star Wars because I don't know if it was a local theater or what, but they had prints. Like this movie was in a theater forever, and then the theaters had prints, and they would constantly run this.
What do you mean, like posters?
No, prints of the movie. So like on film. So Drea, let me explain. Before the era of Blu-ray and UHD and streaming, you would go to the movie theater and they would be running it on film. And so, you don't remember movie theaters running film?
No, I do. But when you say they gave you prints?
No. They had prints.
Oh, okay. Yes.
And so we would go. I remember specifically one of the movie theaters had a relationship with my parents' bank. And the bank would on weekends sponsor like a matinee screening of a movie, and we would always go when it was Star Wars. And we're talking Star Wars. We're talking the print pre A New Hope. So To this day, I don't know what A New Hope is. It's all about Star Wars. There was no episode 4. And so I grew up going and seeing that frequently. In fact, I had, I have a half brother. And I remember one time they used to constantly show the movie at Christmas. And I remember one time he was significantly older than I. I was probably 4, 5-ish, somewhere like my parents dropped us off to go to the movies. He was told to take me to Star Wars. I guess he had seen it too many times. He decided to go see A Christmas Story. And I went into the movie theater by myself and watched Star Wars. And this is back when like a 4-year-old could go into a screening.
Well, this is back when you can kind of like hop theaters.
Yeah, exactly. So he would go. He went and watched A Christmas Story. I watched Star Wars, and so this was the franchise that was my life growing up. We had the toys that we would share.
Folks, when we were young, for folks who are much younger than us,
I'm still young.
well, we would just be like out for hours, going to the theater on our own, like just unsupervised, riding our bikes, like very much like Stranger Things, going to the mall and then going into
the Upside Down,
finding the Demogorgon. And I don't mean to interrupt your story, but the unstructured play, like just kind of hanging out without a beginning and end time, and just like that exploratory go and be free range kids for a bit. Yeah. Hopping through one theater to the other. I had a babysitter that left me in one theater so that they could go see a much more mature film, and I think it was like a Muppets movie or something that I kind of just watched. So
I thought you meant they were going to go see a Muppets movie. It was a much more mature film than whatever you were seeing.
No, but I interrupted you.
Well,
to give that context.
This takes me back to in college when Phantom Menace came out. My best friend Frank and I, this was during finals because he actually missed a final in order to drive to Charlotte, North Carolina, and hang out with our friend. This was our senior year of college because our friend had already graduated. He was a year ahead of us. He was living in Charlotte. We went to the big megaplex there. It was the biggest theater in North Carolina at the time. And we literally waited in line for hours, all day. We were there literally all day. And
that's how you do it.
And
that's how you do a Star Wars.
He missed his final so that we could sit in line. We had T-shirts made. The T-shirts were...
Oh, please tell me what they said on the T-shirts.
This I will tell you. So this was just to buy the tickets. So we bought the tickets and then we waited later for the movie to actually come out. We didn't go like the movie that night. This was just to basically pre-buy your tickets. And so by the time the movie came out, we had T-shirts. They were white, like Hanes tees, and on the front was that image of Darth Maul, just the big, just the headshot that they used for like the novelization of the book and all that.
Yeah.
And on the back were our tickets. So it was just a full back shot of like a scan of one of the tickets with the time and the seat numbers and all that stuff, and it just said Phantom Menace. And
that's actually like really amazing.
Yeah, we all wore it. So
do you still have this T-shirt?
I do have this T-shirt. It's upstairs. It's actually in our attic.
This is in your house right now?
Yes, it is in our attic right now. And so, in fact, I think not too long ago when I was going through a bunch of old stuff, I posted photos on Instagram, and I think that's one of the T-shirts that I posted. But that was how into Darth Maul we were, but also the Phantom Menace. And I got to tell you, this was the first time that you really go in going like, oh my God, Darth Maul. This guy's going to be a badass. Like, how could they possibly create a villain worse than Darth Vader, cooler than Darth Vader?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they've surely done it. And then we see Darth Maul in this movie and whatever.
I'd say that all of the fanfare and anticipation around the release of this movie was one of the first times. We do this now a lot with Marvel releases and still with some Disney releases, but the concept of being in that like anticipatory feeling for a film, that cinematic passion, that cinematic excitement, that for me at least was the first time that happened. I don't remember a movie before then where you had like months of talking about it, coming up with like
years, really.
fan theories.
Yeah, years. Yeah, because it had been like 15 years since Return of the Jedi.
In many ways, this was the development or the first of many of those kinds of experiences. Like this really laid the groundwork for what it's like to know a ton about a movie before it even comes out. I will say too, as we're talking about Star Wars, I admit that there's something nostalgic and very personal about Star Wars as a thing. There would be, and I'll admit, there are many other science fiction stories that might be better written or more psychologically complex, whether it's Battlestar Galactica or even Star Trek. So I'll admit that this isn't the strongest story or the strongest verse, but there's something about this that for me marks the beginning of my love for science fiction. And Brian, growing up, that I had a relationship where my father we would watch science fiction movies. We would watch
Alien.
Like I was probably way too young.
You were watching science fiction horror.
We were watching Alien. I remember watching The Abyss, Close Encounters, E.T., Star Wars. Like these are the kinds of films that I loved, and I'd say that the genre that I'm most interested in is science fiction.
That is true.
And I also read a lot of science fiction. So for me, Star Wars isn't like, oh, that's the best story or that's the best verse. I think what I'm saying is that's so meaningful for me because it represents what brought me in to these to this genre, to this storytelling that I find so remarkably fascinating.
Here's where I will disagree with you, and I can't believe I'm doing this, because I always believed that Star Wars was filled with archetypes. You've just got the farm boy, you got the space wizard, you've got the pirate, you've got the princess. You've got the two sort of gestury characters in the droids. But you have been doing the Psychology of Star Trek versus Star Wars panels with Dr. Ali Mattu for several years, both at WonderCon and Comic-Con. We've had them on the show. And you have managed to pull out more genuine psychological science from this franchise than I ever believed possible. Because I just assumed that if you were going to do a competition between the two franchises, Star Trek was inevitably going to win. And sure enough, you have managed to hold your own every single panel, because it turns out this franchise actually does have quite a bit of psychological science.
There's a lot to it. Also, P.S., I like to win. So I will do what it takes. This is a good lead-in to the Phantom Menace.
To actually talking about this
we
movie?
should definitely. I think we're avoiding the inevitable here. We should probably talk about the film. Okay, so I want to say two things. I want to say something, and then I want to ask you a question.
Okay.
So the first thing I want to say is I fully acknowledge that a ton of people have already talked about the Phantom Menace in terms of its visual effects, the actual cohesiveness of the story, the characters themselves. I know we need to stay in our lane. So what I want to make sure to say is that our focus really is on how this film lends to personal, relational, spiritual, and community well-being and growth. We kind of have to stick to that mental health topic.
So you're saying it's not our job to criticize the making of this movie or the writing of this movie. It is our job simply to analyze the characters within the fictional universe of Star Wars.
Yeah.
As presented to us.
That's what we should do.
That's smart.
And having said that, my question to you, and I actually want to do this at the same time, I'm going to count to 3, and then after I say the number 3, I'd like you to say who you think is the main character of the Phantom Menace. So I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, and then both of us and listeners, if you want to join in on this, name the character you think is the protagonist of The Phantom Menace. Are you ready? Don't think too hard on this.
Okay.
Okay. 1, 2, 3.
Palpatine.
Palpatine?
Yes.
What?
Yeah.
I'd say that's the fourth character down from.
He may not have the most screen time, but I think he is the quote unquote protagonist of the movie.
Wouldn't he be the antagonist?
Well, yes, except remember a little documentary you were in called Necessary Evil, the villains of DC
I barely
Comics?
remember anything.
So I believe I may be mistaken, but I believe it was Dan DiDio or Jeff Johns who made the point that if you're talking about a protagonist being someone who pushes the story forward, then that is inevitably going to be the villain of the story. And the antagonist is the character trying to stop that character from pushing the events forward. Palpatine, from before this movie even started, has a plan in place, and it's actually working exactly how he wants it to. And the entire movie really becomes all about him getting to a point of, now I'm going to be Supreme Chancellor, by the end of this movie. Every scene with him in it, I mean, look at all the other characters in the movie. They're all just treading water. So every time you see Qui-Gon, he's just trying to get a new part for his ship so that they can get to Coruscant. Every time you see Anakin, well, he's just trying to win a pod race so that they can get to Coruscant.
I'm not sure Anakin knows what movie he's in.
Anakin has no idea. He's looking for space angels. Even Padme/Amidala, she's basically just being carted around from place to place and then sent off by her own decoy to do things like cleaning droids. Every single scene that Palpatine is in, he is in charge of the scene and is actively pushing his own story forward. So that's why I say I think the lead character of this movie is Palpatine.
Would you say that Palpatine is the Phantom Menace?
I think he is 100% the Phantom Menace, because I think he is. I think he is the menace that no one understands is there. He's the one who's straight up in your face, but also in the shadows. He is the one that no one suspects, and yet everyone should. And
I mean, his name's in the title, so
right.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I think of this movie as about Qui-Gon, mainly because this is he's in many of the scenes, so it definitely centers on his experience, almost his point of view throughout the film. But I see this as his journey mentoring Obi-Wan, who, by the way, is just so cardboard in this. Just not much happens with Obi-Wan, even after his mentor is murdered in front of him.
But here's what sucks about that, and I don't disagree with you. I think they tried real hard to make this Qui-Gon story, but
yeah.
But the unfortunate thing is, you never really see him mentoring Obi-Wan. I mean,
a lot of it sort of happens pre-screen, off-screen. Like you join them. The beginning of the movie is these two Jedi Knights on a mission together, and the subtext, I think.
Could we talk about that mission for a second, though?
Can we talk about the fact that they're called Jedi Knights, but then at the very end, Yoda tells Obi-Wan he's now a Jedi Knight?
That just means whatever cosmic being wrote the crawl didn't know that Obi-Wan
that's
wasn't
like overseer
already
doesn't know.
But I will say, okay, so I want to ask you about this, because we're meant to believe that Jedi are good, just sort of inherently good beings. They are the antithesis of the Sith, who are constantly power hungry and evil.
Yeah, these are peacemakers. They're and I understand them as as stoic peacemakers by definition, who channel the Force,
Yeah.
and who understand and navigate
Yeah.
at the essence of the Force in a way that no one else does.
Okay.
And I guess to kind of I don't know, like justify why I think this movie why Qui-Gon is the protagonist of this movie, is that I felt like he was teaching us about the Force. Like he was giving us the
exposition.
the exposition, and we were following him through his mentorship, the discovery of this child who's going to create balance to the Force. He brings him in, he rescues him, he builds
so many problems
I
I
know
have
there's
with
going to be
this.
some problems, but this is about him, and he builds that narrative
Yeah, sure.
as the main character, and he shows us this he's not like a rogue, he's not subversive, but I think he is gently pushing against this rule, this state of things, the standard quo.
He just straight up tells the Jedi Council that he's basically going to train the kid whether
there's a
they want him to or
gentle
not.
defiance about Qui-Gon,
Right.
and that is a little bit of a character. I wouldn't say like a lot of character development, but I'd say that's a character feature that we're following with him until his demise.
So let me ask you about this little moment, because this bothers me to no end. And I think it says a lot about who the Jedi really are. So during this Trade Federation dispute, why
don't you explain the plot of this
the embargo
movie?
and okay, all right. So here's the problem that I have. The Federation sends. Wait, who is it? Who sends the Jedi? It's not the Federation.
Well, it's the Galactic Senate, right?
Right. Okay. So the Senate sends the two Jedi to conduct negotiations with the Trade Federation.
Yeah.
And the issue that I have with this is the Trade Federation. Are they Neimoidians or what they're called? They instantly know that these two Jedi have been sent to basically kill them. To intimidate them into dropping their
blockade.
Their blockade, and so they come right out and say it. Like, why did they send them here? Oh, this is over. We need to end this right away. There's just no getting out of this.
Yeah.
And the problem that I have is that Qui-Gon straight up says to Obi-Wan, these negotiations will be short. They are cowards. Which means he knows going in. He's going in with intimidation. If they're cowards, it means you know that you're going to use everything you can, whether it's the Force, because we've seen him on several occasions throughout this movie try to use his Jedi mind tricks. So he's trying to manipulate the situations unnaturally. And if that doesn't work, he's ready to be intimidating because of the fact that he's a Jedi Knight to these businessmen, I guess.
It's like step 1, be coercive. Step 2, use violence.
Yeah.
Step 3,
Yeah.
celebrate.
Straight up.
Which, if you look at the plan like that,
when he calls them cowards,
yeah,
they are cowards. These negotiations will be short.
Yeah,
that really bothers me.
The part of this that never sat right with me is that they're sending Jedi Knights who are, I thought, kind of more neutral, hands-off kinds of folks into a negotiating interaction.
We're
like,
meant
what
to,
good?
yeah.
How are they? Like, why are you sending these two Jedi? The other thing too is that I think the movie is meant to show us that the Trade Federation is a group of bullies, that they are sort of like taxing tyrants. I don't know if that's the best. Like they're abusing their power over Naboo.
Yeah.
And I think we're meant to see the Jedi as the heroes in this moment. In the very beginning of the movie, their willingness to step up to these bullies is kind of what I think we're supposed to understand.
Yeah.
But none of that even goes as planned because the droids of that ship are the most intelligent, effective folk in that, like, they're like, oh, these are Jedi, we need to kill them. Let's attack them. And
The droids?
well, the droids recognize that they're Jedi.
Oh, yeah.
The droids,
The protocol
yeah,
droid.
the protocol droid, and then the battle droids go and attack them.
But they're sent to. I mean,
Yeah,
they're told straight up, gas them, wait for them to be dead, and then destroy their bodies. So, yeah, the protocol droid seems to be the most intelligent of the bunch. In that, I presume the protocol droid is female presenting because it's got a female voice when she greets them and says, "Here's your tea," and then
here's the other tea.
here's the
You got some Jedi up in here.
yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting how big of a part Jedi play in the politics of all this. Yet they're not really a huge part of the actual politicking. Like, they have their own Jedi Council and they run their own system around that. Who gets in, who becomes a Jedi Knight, who gets trained, who's old enough to get
Who's
trained.
too old.
Blah, 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 who has too much of fear in them, all that stuff. So, backing up a little bit.
And by the way, what does that even mean? So Yoda, you're talking about Yoda.
Yeah.
Yoda says that Anakin can't become trained by the Jedi because they sense too much.
emotional.
They sense too much fear in him.
So here's kind of the setup. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan go to Tatooine because that is the only planet
In the entire
universe.
Star Wars universe,
Where everything
It's
happens.
either that or Coruscant.
So they go to Tatooine. They encounter this little slave who is
He might be the most entitled little slave I've ever
and his mother,
ever seen
Shmi,
in a movie.
Yeah, he and his mother Shmi essentially are unpaid servants of Watto, who
I mean, you can call him a slave. That's literally what they're called.
yeah, no,
And-
yeah. They are traded.
Watto was a
and-
Toydarian.
Yeah, they're traded and they're used in exchange for parts and money, and it's dehumanizing. So Qui-Gon, interestingly, doesn't necessarily save him because he's a slave. He saves him because he has some force energy about him.
And more force energy than he's ever detected in more natural force
Yes.
energy in the midi-chlorians than he's ever seen in a drop of blood in any living being, including Yoda.
Without consent, he draws his blood while
I mean, the kid,
curing a wound.
he handed his finger over. He was cool with
He
it.
draws his blood, sends it back to the lab, the Jedi lab, and he finds out it's just full of these
bacteria.
these little symbiotic microbes that have the Force. So there's that. So that's introduced in this film, and then through the most mind-boggling, perplexing gambling conversation that that just confuses everybody. Qui-Gon is able to
Win the kid.
yeah, he wins the kid, and he takes him to.
But he even cheats. I mean, he's cheating
Yeah.
the cheater because clearly Watto is using weighted dice. He thinks that when he rolls it, it's going to inevitably roll up in his favor. But Qui-Gon again uses the Force to manipulate the dice to stop on the color he needs it to, and that basically means, okay, the kid is now up for grabs.
Qui-Gon is willing to bend the Force or the use of the Force for kind of like, at least, you can push back on this, but it seems like he's willing to bend the Force in order to appreciate or serve the rights and dignity of other beings. In this case, for Anakin.
Well, he didn't make any effort to get Shmi. In fact, not only did he not make an effort to get Shmi, he made an effort not to get Shmi because the dice were going to say it was either Anakin or the mom. And he's like, I don't want the mom, I want the kid. And he stopped the dice to get the kid. Like, he could have freed Shmi, and he didn't. He didn't even negotiate to try to get them really both. It was like you could have one or the other, and he wasn't like, he's already won all this other stuff. He couldn't have created a side bet. There couldn't have been no, there was nothing.
Yeah.
Ugh.
You'd think that Anakin would actually be a great candidate for Jediism because he just seems
impetulant and entitled,
like unaware of like complex emotions, even though they're saying
that's just because Jake Lloyd is a wooden actor.
Even though they're saying he has so much fear in him. Here's what I would have liked.
He always looks angry.
What I would have liked is to show us that fear. If Yoda is saying so much fear lives in the body of this little boy, if you tell me about his history, I'd say, of course, he's been traded. He's been objectified. He's been traumatized. He and his mother are dehumanized. He's living this upbringing as a slave. His rights are dishonored. His dignity is dishonored. I'd agree with what could potentially be an explanation that he's potentially emotionally dysregulated and is potentially has unreconciled suffering, and of course that would worry me. I would want to protect him and care for him, but when Yoda says there's so much fear in him that he can't be trained, I wish there was evidence for that.
Yeah, because the moment we meet him, he walks right into Watto's shop. He's clearly sort of got the run of Watto's place because he's the only real mechanic Watto seems to have. Like Watto wants to keep him specifically because this kid is like a genius with machinery. And so he comes in, he's back talking Watto. He's back talking other people in the community, like who's the Doug, Sebulba. When Sebulba threatens him, he's like, "Yeah, whatever, slime ball. I'll see you on the racing." And I'm like, "What are you doing?" Like, this kid is the most entitled little boy who is supposedly a servant. He's walking around town like he owns the place. He says yippee so many times. You'd think this kid was just like super thrilled about everything that's going on in his life. You never see a hardship on Tatooine, except that he's on Tatooine. Like that's the extent of his hardship. He's not only been able to build his own racer out of scrap parts. He competes regularly in the pod races. He has gained enough respect by the other racers around them that they all view him as a potential threat in the upcoming race. Sebulba straight up says, like, I'm going to have to kill you. We know that Sebulba really doesn't kill you if you're not a threat to him. So there's all this. The kid basically runs the show from the moment we meet him. And then when he wins the race, he wins his freedom, says goodbye to his mom. It takes all of 2 minutes.
says goodbye to his droid.
His droid, who he's built from scratch, but he straight up just goes, "Sorry I didn't get to finish you, 3PO. It was really good knowing you, and bye," and just leaves, like throws on his little backpack and takes off with Qui-Gon. And then they visit Obi-Wan, who's back at the Nubian ship, and this is, again, one of those cases where I just don't feel like I've seen any mentorship from Qui-Gon with Obi-Wan, because Obi-Wan's not even with him most of the time. He's elsewhere. He's like wiping his hands and
I'm
fixing.
not sure they knew what to do.
He's fixing the ship
with Obi-Wan, and knowing what happens to Qui-Gon at the end of this movie, he is the Obi-Wan of this movie. He gets
And what you mean
slaughtered.
by that is in terms of Star Wars. He
gets killed. His young mentee is changed by this, and then presumably the next movie will be about
the mentee.
Obi-Wan.
The mentee could have. This is where it gets weird and bad as well. We see in the beginning scene, as they're trying to get into the Federation, the Trade Federation bridge, the blast doors are closing. There's like 3 layers of blast doors. That I guess signifies just how much of a cowardly race the Neimoidians are, because they don't just have one set of blast doors. They've got like 3 sets of blast doors to prevent anyone from getting onto the bridge. Qui-Gon uses the Force, pushes his lightsaber all the way through. They're freaking out. They then are attacked by droid Dakars, the little round droids, battle droids that roll up, the little roly-poly droids. They roll up. They've got shields. The 2 Jedi are gone in the blink of an eye. They've got like super speed, which never comes in handy again. In fact, the whole climax with Qui-Gon only happens because Obi-Wan doesn't use his super speed. He runs down the little bridge toward the battle with Darth Maul and Qui-Gon and doesn't make it in time, and he gets stuck.
Yeah.
And
that super speed would have been pretty useful then.
Really helpful. And so you're like, well, geez, just how good a mentor were you, Qui-Gon, that you didn't teach him to think about these things on his own? You had to tell him, let's go. And then you both used super speed, but you weren't there to tell him, let's go, at the end. And now you did. Spoiler alert, now you did. Oh, you already said he got slaughtered, so everything's fine.
Yeah, we got there. Let's talk about Queen Amidala.
Okay, so this is an interesting one for me, and I want to ask you your opinion of this. So Amidala, the queen, might also be one of the most wooden, most emotionless characters in the movie. If it's not Anakin, simply because Jake Lloyd's not a good actor, it's Natalie Portman as Amidala. Is that some sort of statement that in order for a woman to be accepted as a ruler, as a queen, as a political figure, she has to show no emotion? I'm not sure I understand, because when you see her as Padme, she's relatively normal. But when she's Amidala, she talks like this: "I will not let my community go under the no, this cannot
I have
stand."
thoughts about this.
Okay, I want to know.
It's as if the authentic self, which is Padme,
Yeah.
who luckily gets to experience that when her decoy is in the queen's robes.
Yeah, I've got so many problems with that. Go ahead.
And she's also, when she's acting as queen, is performing. This is a social performance. It's
Yes.
Actually, while she does it to an extreme level, and I think there's a function to it, which I'll mention, all of us do this. I think this is a really good example about like when you're in your professional role, you speak a little bit differently. You wear different clothes. You carry yourself differently. You even have a completely different way, a tone of talking, a different vocabulary.
Sure.
this is also true of people who maybe because of identity characteristics probably need to do more of this than not. Now, I don't know if that's the situation with her, but I'm saying I can appreciate a way in which we can relate to this is like, oh, there's a lot of code switching that has to happen.
Sure.
In order for her to kind of get the job done.
Well, and also in order for the ruse of Padme
exactly.
being queen to actually.
That's the other thing is that for any of her handmaidens, I can't remember what they call them, for them to then act as the queen so she can go off on her own and clean droids and do whatever it is that she wants to do.
Okay, so can we talk?
Yes.
Yeah, can we talk about that?
But they all kind of have to talk, like they all are taught to talk that way so that when they play the role as the queen while she's, secretly a handmaiden, they all sound like she sounds. So it's kind of it's a ploy. It's a ploy.
Well, and we know that she was elected to the position. She was a newly elected queen of Naboo. And we know, not to go into things we're not supposed to talk about, but we know in a future movie she is no longer queen and there is a new queen that has taken over and she looks and sounds the exact same way. So this seems to be a traditional role. This seems to be whomever is queen, which also makes me wonder, what are those elections like? Like what is the campaigning like for that?
It's like auditions.
Yeah, like I want to know how you campaigned to be that wooden character. And can you only be queen? Like, are there no kings of Naboo? Like, is it all because she's replaced by another woman, which is fine. I've got no problem with that. But are there only queens of Naboo? Or are there kings of Naboo as well who, if they win the election, if Bob down the way won the election instead of whomever takes over for her, would he then also speak like this and be wooden? Okay, so we've talked about this a little bit. I'm really bothered by the authority that the decoys seem to have when she is as a handmaid. Like they seem to come up with really weird times to use the decoys because you're on the ship. There's really no need for her to use a decoy. No one's coming to kill you in the ship. Like you can trust everyone who's on board.
Yeah, at that point they've escaped.
Right.
With the handful of fighters and
you've escaped. You've got an Anakin. You got all this. You've escaped from Naboo. There's no real reason to have a decoy at that moment. But what's interesting is the decoy says, "Padme, will you go clean this droid up as best you can?" So the decoy is sending the real queen out while they're presumably talking about the upcoming mission that they're going to be going on, so that the real queen, the authentic queen, can go downstairs and clean up a droid. That is filthy, by the way. And I want to know if there was punishment or some kind of repercussion for having done this, because I would think you would want your genuine queen to be there with you to overhear everything that's happening, all the plans that are being made. But no. I need you to go clean up that dirty droid. By the way, which we are giving commendations to for having done its job. Like I told you, this is like me giving an award to the Keurig for making you a coffee.
Aww.
It's an astromech droid. Its job is to fix the ship. And that's exactly what it did.
But it's R2-D2. He's the hero droid.
Right. Yeah, he was a brave little thing going out there on the ship and fixing the shield generator.
Yeah.
Okay, but what would you like to say about Padme / Amidala? What are your thoughts on her character as a whole?
I think that what I understood is her feeling like a tool. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but
No, she's totally a tool.
Like she's kind of we know that the Senator Palpatine is like figuratively and literally whispering in her ear to do certain things on the Senate floor, which kind of gives me the creeps. He does that, implying that she should have a vote of no confidence for the sitting senior senator. I forgot what they call him.
He's the High Chancellor, the Supreme High Chancellor.
Yikes.
Valorum.
So he's
Terrence Stamp, by the way.
I don't know who that is.
He's a magnificent actor who, by the way, was the only actor in this cast to get to read the whole script before deciding to take the part, because he absolutely refused when George called him up. He said, I won't do it unless I get to read it.
Did he even have a line?
Yeah, he says, I'm Supreme High Chancellor of Valorum.
Yeah. Okay.
And he says some stuff in the Senate chamber before he sits down and gets all quiet.
Yeah, and then he's voted off. So,
which also makes no sense.
So Palpatine, so the Senator Palpatine is whispering in Padme
Amidala's ear.
Senator Amidala's ear.
No, she's not
Queen
senator yet.
Amidala's
Queen, yeah.
Amidala's ear.
And it's unusual for her to even be here, right? Because when they announce her, everyone's like, "Ooh!" They've never seen her there before. She's never really left Naboo. Yeah. She's there to take care of her people, and even she's even like, "No, I don't want to leave."
She is. She doesn't want war. At one point, she says, "I refuse any action that leads to war." I don't know, that sounded more like
E.T.
But she is trying to avoid warfare. She is insisting that there is great suffering on her planet. What's weird is at this point we don't see the people of Naboo
suffering
in that. Apparently, they're getting.
No, they're all sitting down. They're all sitting cross-legged and just hanging out.
Well, that one guy is saying that they're actually being killed, and there's great political abuses that are happening on that planet, but we never really see.
And makes you wonder if it's even really happening.
What is going on? So here's what I'll say about her, and it's particularly brief. She's passionate about the people that she rules and oversees. She does not want to go to war, but she has this persistence about her. She has this, this commitment to doing what's right.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And then I kind of lose her to, I don't know, I lose her to Padme becoming a part of the Jedi group. Like, you don't really see much more in her develop. And again, it kind of goes back to this concept that we really want a main protagonist. We just covered Endgame. There isn't a single protagonist. There's many protagonists, but you earn that. Mm-hmm. You get there with literally a decade of movies.
Yeah.
So with this party, with this group of people, it's a little bit of a disservice to give us a little bit of everyone, but not really fulfill and develop these characters for us. So, so TBD on Queen Amidala.
But she's also very, I feel like this entire movie is just filled with entitled people, because you've got Qui-Gon, who feels like he needs to be able to train this little kid. You got this little kid who feels like he needs to be trained by them because he won a pod race and now he belongs to this dude. And he came all the way over this way. He left his mother so that he could be trained. And this guy told me that I had more of this stuff in my blood than anybody. I need to be one of you. And then when they tell him no, he looks at him like he's going to kill them all. By the way, he will. And then you've got Amidala, who also bothers me, because this is like where we're talking about the politics, right? We're talking about winning what you need to in politics. She shows up, she says, I demand that you take action now. And then when the chancellor's like, no, we're going to investigate. We're going to actually send someone out and we're going to investigate. She's like, I will not accept that. I think you should be voted out of office. And then she overturns the government. She doesn't even have that right at this point. Like, she's not even a senator in the Senate. And she's like, well, I say we vote no confidence. And you see how many senators, how many delegations there are in that Senate. You're telling me that because of this one thing, more than half of them said, yeah, we're cool with that. We'll impeach him.
Yeah.
We'll have a super majority that impeaches him. It's almost like this entire Senate was just waiting for this opportunity to kick him out. Doesn't make any sense. But the fact that she is willing to pull that trigger simply because the Supreme High Chancellor was like, no, I think we should send a delegation to actually investigate what's going on at your planet. And if you're right, we'll do something about it. It was another like sort of case of entitlement to me. He's like, no, you can't go investigate.
Right.
You make the decision
gotta take it
in
on
my
my
favor
word.
right now, or I think you should be voted out.
Then you've got Yaddle sitting on her high throne in the Jedi Council.
I mean, all those thrones are high for Yaddle.
All right, so
Obi-Wan equally entitled. Obi-Wan and sort of impulsive and petulant and constantly I don't even know really what to say about it.
There's not much.
He's got a real thing about, like, I don't like people. I don't like other people. I don't think we should bring her with us. I don't think we should bring the kid with us. I don't think we should bring that Jar Jar thing with us. He's right about that one. I don't think that we should bring, yada yada. Not Yaddle, but yada yada. Like, he doesn't like people. He's going to make a great hermit one day.
Yeah.
He's going to make a great old crazy man out in the Dune Sea. It's going to be great.
He's ready.
I think I think Ewan McGregor's great performance in this movie. I just don't care one way or another about Obi-Wan.
Well, I promised that I would amplify what is good about the Phantom Menace. And I do appreciate what you say about the main villain. That Palpatine, who isn't even named,
Sidious.
as a Sith Lord, right? He's not even quite named yet, but his presence is there and his puppeteering is there. I'd say that that's one strength of this story, that this phantom, this idea of I'm just going to go and say it, the menacing force of manipulation, of greed,
politics,
of power, of politics. You're absolutely right. This concept of like wanting to rule over people and wanting to use them as tools and dehumanizing everybody around you so that you can get what you want. I want more of that from this movie. On the flip side,
you want more of the politics.
Not the politics, friend. Not the politics. I guess I would want more of that pervasive evil force. Like, give us less of those other, a few less scenes of the battle droids and the Gungans and the what is the other,
and the repetitive stuff. Like they're underwater at one point, and we've got a harrowing moment where a big gooberfish bites down on the ship that they're in, and then a much larger fish takes it and rips it in half and eats it. And Qui-Gon says, "There's always a bigger fish," and then it happens again. Like they don't even get out of the water before it happens again. There's so much of this movie is on repeat that I don't even understand. It's like they were trying to pad out the runtime, and they didn't need to. It was already a movie over 2 hours.
The other thing that I appreciate about this movie is, in fact, Qui-Gon as a representative, as a true ambassador of the Jedi way, in a way that makes sense to him. Because we can sit here and kind of raise an eyebrow with Yoda's insistence on, like, you know, there's an age cutoff for, you know, training young Jedi or Mace or anybody on that council. Qui-Gon is kind of a breath of fresh air, and I think that what I care about in terms of the Force, which is not midichlorians, BT dubs, but
let's make that clear.
That concept, as a sidebar, the midichlorian, plot is as upsetting as the idea that everybody who matters is a Skywalker or a descendant of Sidious or whatever. Like those ideas bother me so much that you are, born into something and deserving of being the center of the story, and I hate that.
I feel the same way. I hate that the Skywalkers are at the center of everything. I will say this: there was an interview that. I'm sorry. It was not an interview. Our good friend. Actually, I don't know if I should say who it is because he worked at Lucasfilm for a little while. Spoke with George on a regular basis. Brought this up to George, and George responded, "Well, think of it this way," because our friend, said the same thing about how we don't like that you're basically saying that in the beginning you were saying that like anyone can harness the Force if they just learn to quiet their mind and listen to it, and now you're telling us that you can only do it if you have enough midichlorians. And George's response was, "You have to think of it like an NBA, like an athlete, like an NBA player."
Brian.
No. He said, anyone can play basketball, but Shaq is going to be better than you. And so he wasn't cutting off the idea that just any rando could use the Force, but that there were going to be people like Anakin who were just going to be more naturally inclined to it, no matter how good you got or how much you practice. Okay. Do I agree with that? I do not agree with that.
I don't either.
But
that makes me hate it even more. Okay. Qui-Gon teaches us a few important things about emotion regulation and a concept of mindfulness. And I think other Jedi have done this before. I think Yoda certainly has taught us this before.
Yeah.
But if this is really the first character, if we're thinking of this as the first movie in the chronological series.
Yes, that's how we have to.
He is teaching us that it's not that you shouldn't have emotions. It's not that you should listen to emotions. In fact, you should be interoceptive. He's always, I shouldn't say always, but he's almost always in the moment, in the present. He's able to constantly, consistently feel and interpret and understand the way his body is in his current time, in his current moment. Mm-hmm. And he even says, when you learn to quiet your mind, you will hear the Force speaking to you. You will sense. Now, he was actually talking about midichlorians.
Yeah, they'll speak to you. Yeah,
but he's basically saying, concentrate on the now, on the moment, and feel what you're feeling. Don't get overwhelmed by thoughts. Don't let your thoughts rule you. Don't let your thoughts be fact. Use your instincts. Use your sense of self. And I think a lot of times, especially in our, living experience, we're overwhelmed with thoughts. And a lot of times we think thoughts are facts. I think a certain thing, therefore it must be fact. I'm going to let that, guide or drive my reactions. Mm-hmm. And often we forget what we're actually feeling. So I think there's some wisdom there around emotional intelligence that can be harnessed and really appreciated about Qui-Gon. I like that he's a cool cucumber, that he's not even stoic.
He yells at people a lot.
Well, I don't know that he doesn't yell. He kind of like maybe snaps once in a while. Does he?
That's what I mean, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'll snap
But
at you.
he's not like raising his voice and hollering. He's, for the most part, harnessing how he feels and just trying to be curious about what's happening around him. That observant kind of mindset. I even wrote down while we were watching The Phantom Menace, one of my favorite quotes from him. At one point, I think this is in the Trade Federation ship or whatever, and Obi-Wan is panicking a little bit, and Qui-Gon says, "I don't sense anything," which is really telling because he's relying on what he senses to guide him. And it's as if he's saying, let's not act yet. Let's not be impulsive. Let's not, move without taking a moment to understand how this is impacting us and what we feel in our bodies.
Interesting. So as a psychologist, something that you just brought up, I want to ask your opinion, how you feel about this. How do you feel about the idea of quieting your own mind enough that you can hear a billion little voices telling you what to do? And by that I mean the midichlorians. If they're the ones talking to you, you got billions of little voices that are just like...
I don't know that I take that so literally, but... But imagine hearing or experiencing the souls of millions just being exterminated.
You're not allowed to talk about any of that yet.
I know. I do think a lot of times people misunderstand the Jedi, and I'll stick to this film, but this concept that they are unemotional, cannot have attachments, cannot...
We've not talked about any of that yet, so you can't,
I think that Qui-Gon is setting an example of what it might be like to be open and vulnerable to emotions, but not necessarily letting them drive your decisions or letting them overwhelm you, but just approaching them with curiosity.
Is Qui-Gon your Bruce Wayne of this movie? Like he's given up like a older teenage, early 20-something ward so that he can have another little boy ward, and he's basically straight up saying, "No, look, I'm gonna train him, whether you like it or not."
I don't know. He truly
for
believes,
better or for worse.
This is probably where we can wrap things up. Is this concept of Qui-Gon adopting this child for the purposes of training him to bring balance to the Force? And I look around and I'm like, what? Why
do you need that? Why do you want that?
What are you balancing?
Yeah, the problem right now is there are only two Sith. There's Palpatine and there's Darth Maul. And there's a crap ton of Jedi. I would say, hey, we're on the heavier side of this balance right now, so maybe you don't want to balance anything at this point. We're doing okay right now. If everything is nice and bright and shiny on our side, and suddenly someone says, "No, I got this kid. He's going to bring balance to the Force," and you're like, I think we're pretty good. We don't want any kids to bring balance.
Unless bringing balance means to have the dark side just as strong as the light side.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
We don't want that to happen. Like right now, we're doing pretty well. Like the dark side is they're off in the shadows, and there's only a couple of them. Like right now, the Jedi, I would say, are on the heavier side of those scales. You don't want any balancing to happen because that would mean that a bunch of you have to get wiped out.
This is also the point where Yoda gives that, hugely reminiscent, powerful quote about emotions. And it's so meaningful for the entire narrative that you should probably, you've got the...
You're talking about the fear
Yeah.
leads to, I've got that. Yep. You want to hear it?
Yeah.
All right.
What does that got to do with anything?
Everything. Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering.
I have always had somewhat of a problem with this chain of emotions.
Well, there's a lot of jumping. There's a lot of jumping from one to the other.
Let me start with the strengths, which is that we do have complex emotional patterns, and often one emotion will lead to another. In fact, typically the emotion that is on the surface, the one that we're expressing or utilizing, the one that's kind of we're giving that energy, is a secondary emotion. And there's usually a primary emotion, one a little bit deeper, that is the origin or the trigger for that second emotion. So as an example, let's say that I felt great shame about something. Maybe I had a setback or mistake, and I feel this self-doubt and shame, and I end up snapping at someone or getting mad at somebody. That anger is a more suitable, maybe even more appropriate expression, at least in our culture, than expressing my shame, because that emotion is too vulnerable, it's too difficult to deal with, and I can't tolerate it, so that I work through that by expressing another emotion. So Yoda isn't wrong with the concept of emotions happening in constellations, in groups like that, or as a sequence. But I hate how he's so fixated on the fact that fear is like the end all, like it's going to end all of times.
Well, I think what he's saying, and I don't disagree with him at all, actually, here is when you think of, because this movie is so embedded in politics, if you think about our politics of today, even, so much of politics is driven on fear mongering, right? Like you're the other side, and no matter what side of the aisle you're on, the other side is going to do this thing to you. And you become really afraid of that. And then that makes you really angry about it. And then you really start to hate that other side. And inevitably, suffering is going to happen as a result. And so I think that he's right in that regard. It doesn't matter what side you're on. That is the chain of events when you're talking about politics. And when you're talking about this kid, I guess when you're talking about this kid who's going to be very afraid of the future and what he could lose. And I'm not going to go into things that I'm not allowed to talk about, but that is what Yoda is saying, is like, you're really afraid of what you could lose. And the moment you become afraid or too afraid of what you can lose, that's going to make you angry. That's going to make you hate your foes. And then that's going to lead to a lot of suffering. It could be yours, it could be others, but there's going to be suffering that's happening, and you're going to have to like reckon with all of this that originated with fear. Fear that could have been controlled and should have been controlled. Now the question is, how are they like basically breeding fear out of these small children, these like younglings? How are they they're basically flooding them until they're not scared of things anymore. I'm terrified of, and I realize that that's a fear. I am terrified of what the Jedi are actually doing to younglings to like make them stronger as they get older. I
think I would want a little bit more compassion, like the concept that if you have a lot of fear in you, it's okay. Like we're fearful beings, and it's okay to experience that, to feel that, to acknowledge that.
Yes.
And to stigmatize somebody that has, quote, too much fear makes me upset.
So, 100%.
But what you said in the context of politics, like, totally rings a bell for me. Like, I think that's, if you look to Yoda's bold statement, And the fact that he's saying this as a part of the Jedi Council.
Yeah.
And that's such a like strangely political context for him.
I will say
yeah.
this. For as much as I dislike these prequel movies, and I dislike them. I don't hate Phantom Menace as much as everyone else, although I will say that this was the longest I ever had to sit through it. Like I just felt interminably long to me.
Yeah.
I don't hate this one as much as I really strongly dislike Attack of the Clones. But I will say this. You and I listened to the audiobook of The Secret History of Star Wars. It is an incredible book. If you've not read it or listened to it, I highly recommend you listen to it because the narrator does a great job, but also does voices of all the people that are being interviewed in it. You cannot deny that this is exactly the story George Lucas originally wanted to tell, because when you hear the synopses of some of those original drafts of the screenplay that would eventually become Star Wars, he is talking about a galactic senate and the fall from grace, and he's talking about the creation of the empire. He's literally talking about trade federations and embargoes and blockades and Mace Windu, Jedi Bendu, and he is talking about all this stuff. So, for as much as I dislike the story he's telling, it is genuinely the story that the auteur wanted from the very beginning. And he trimmed the fat in order to create Star Wars, but now he felt the need to put the fat back in. And it's not my bag. What were your thoughts as you watched Phantom Menace for the first time from the perspective of someone who was specifically analyzing it?
Yeah, I think the takeaway for me is, again, really centered on Qui-Gon's compassion and persistence, this concept that he, I think, authentically wanted to bring this young kid into a system that he felt, yes, was flawed and didn't have room for him. Mm-hmm. But maybe this is the Bruce Wayne piece. I sensed that he wanted to be reparative with this young kid.
Yeah.
Maybe shape him and mentor him and give him a life worth living as a part of this community that would also help him restore what he felt the Jedi way was. Because you get a sense that underneath Qui-Gon is kind of, he's a maverick in a way. He's kind of like, like I said, kind of like going his own way.
But he's also a zealot. I mean, and I'm not.
That's totally fair.
I'm not kidding about that, because he basically decides that this is what he's going to do. He's going to buck the system because he believes this kid could be the chosen one, as referenced in a prophecy. So I mean, like, he has now gone off the deep end of now he's got such blind faith in his religion or his whatever, that he's like, no, not only am I going to go against the council and train this kid, it's going to eventually backfire.
What is a little bit painful, maybe even more painful, is the scene where Qui-Gon dies and he pulls Obi-Wan close to him and he's about to say his last words to presumably his companion, his mentee, and he spends that time talking about this kid. Like, you got to mentor this kid. I believe in this kid. How much I wished him to say he believed in Obi-Wan.
Well, he already did that. Like, George Lucas made sure to put that in earlier so that he didn't have to do it here.
I guess.
He had to make Obi-Wan promise to take this kid on. Like, he was now Qui-Gon's baggage. And Obi-Wan's now responsible for him.
Carries the burdens.
But ultimately, the prophecy is real. So I mean, like, when I say he's a zealot, he did exactly what the prophecy said it would do. But I'm not down with anyone who just goes like, no, this now has to happen because clearly blah 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 blah. And so anyway, All right, so that's this episode. I hope everyone is enjoying their rewatching of the Star Wars franchise. If you are a patron, by the way, you should log on to Patreon and you should vote whether you want us to include the movies that are not in the direct Skywalker legacy. And by that I mean Rogue One and Solo. We will add those if you vote for us to analyze them. We will not analyze them if you do not vote for it, because I really think they're just sort of thrown in there. I don't think they're necessary to the story, but we're leaving that up to you.
For those of you who I saw at Star Wars Celebration over the weekend, so good to human with you, to be back in person for some of these events. If I didn't see you, take good care of yourselves. These are up and down times, rough times. So please do take moments to take care of yourself and your loved ones.
Yeah. We're going to cover our experience a little bit on Patreon as well, so you can come over and check that out. Drea, why don't you tell the good folks where they can find you online?
You can find me on my website, drdreapsychology.com, and on Instagram and Twitter at Arkham Asylum Doc.
You can find me on Twitter. I am at bward028, or on Instagram at b_ward028. You can find me. You can find us both on Twitter at Arkham Sessions and on Instagram at The Arkham Sessions. You can email us arkhamsessions@gmail.com. Come find us on Facebook. Come find us on all the socials. We want to thank our good friends and family over at Fanbase Press. You should check out their site for more podcasts and all of your favorite comics news, and of course their comics themselves. Thank you to everyone, and may the Force be with you. Till next time, I'm Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Drea Letamendi.
And together we are
The Arkham Sessions.